I am with Skyler here today, and we're going to talk about what it's like to plan a wedding in Jackson Hole. Skyler is a destination wedding planner. She is based out of Houston, and currently she's in a hotel for a wedding event, but she's taking the time today to chat about this. So, Skyler, talk to me. When you work with couples getting married in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, they're flying all their friends and family in. What is that process like to help them think through that wedding experience?
So first, number one thing that I am going to recommend for couples who want to get married in Jackson, who are less familiar with the area, and even if you are pretty familiar, is I would recommend working with a travel concierge or agent to really take care of those room blocks for you. Jackson Hole is very popular. And if you're getting married in high season, it's going to book up quickly and the rates are going to skyrocket. So working with an agent early in advance, I really believe that Jackson's one of those places you kind of can't do like a short-term planning sort of thing. So when I say short-term planning, I mean kind of like 8 months or shorter before the wedding, is if you are scared about the economical impact on your guests being able to get there, because it does, supply and demand. Rooms have decreased, therefore those rates have decreased. Same thing, or have increased. Same thing for your flights and everything like that. So rental cars, which actually I was recently talking to a stationer who was giving me some advice, because she said that last year during high season, they actually ran out of rental cars because, there's a nationwide rental car shortage. And so like locals were renting their cars out to wedding guests so that they could get around town. And so I think that overall, all of this is saying, book things early in Jackson, because it is growing in popularity, has been popular, but is growing in popularity, not just for events, but for outdoor sports.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Jackson is a very small town, especially if you've been there, you know that. And so if you plan late, you run out of stuff. I had an experience where I did a 4th of July. The couple booked me late and it was brutal finding locations. Unbelievable.
Yes.
Talk to me real quick. You mentioned right at the get-go, you said, hey, find an agent, somebody who can, I think you said like room block. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like if somebody's like, oh, that sounds great, what do I do?
Yeah. So obviously a lot of planners can help you find a basic room block. We can get you a fairly decent, discounted rate. That's what room blocks provide you. Typically those are contracted, which means you are financially responsible for a certain amount of rooms getting booked. So there's an attrition rate. Usually it's around 10%. Sometimes it's higher depending on what time of year it is, that you have to, that you're saying that you're going to have, let's just say you've, for ease, 10 rooms, you've got to book at least 9 of those, or else you're on the hook for up to 9 rooms financially. A courtesy block is the name, or complimentary block, they kind of use interchangeably, is the other type of room block. Those are much harder to get, and they typically come with a lower discounted rate for your guests. So while a planner can set that up for you, typically the relationships that a travel agent has will allow you to have an even lower rate. Your guests typically get more amenities added into that rate. So like, complimentary breakfasts or different things like that go with it. Different resort things that you can kind of build into a special package than you would if you're working through a planner just to book the room rate for them. So I think that is a huge plus there. Plus as well, you could expand, and depending on, you could offer up, whether you wanted to cover it or you wanted to offer it up to your guests to cover it. Your travel agent and concierge could take care of not only those room blocks, but also airline travel, any activities that they want to do surrounding the wedding weekend that you aren't sponsoring, those sorts of things that really set that up for you. And once again, they typically get pretty good discounts on all of those things versus if they're setting it up themselves.
I love it. That was super helpful. Okay. So you also mentioned timing. You're like, if you plan a wedding there, you have limited resources in terms of cars, housing, all that stuff. You mentioned 8 months. What would you like to see if somebody's thinking, man, we're engaged. We know we want to get married in Jackson. When should we start this process? What would you love to see come up?
Like 12 to 14 months, honestly.
Perfect.
Like to really be able to make sure that you're getting your top people and your top vendors. I'm at about 9 months out from a client's wedding in Jackson, and they kind of booked me later, and we're bumping up against some issues with the specific rentals that they want and stuff like that. We're looking at having to bring it from out of state, which is going to be higher delivery fees and things like that. And that can just start adding up. So I really encourage you to not only start soon, but you have to make decisions fairly quickly. You need to streamline those decisions for yourself. Don't keep looking at vendor options after vendor options, which, I mean, Jackson is somewhat limited. So there's going to be less of that you have in front of you. But, making those decisions quickly is important. When I'm looking at kind of like that, I break down my planning into 4 phases of planning. And that first phase of planning is kind of like getting your key vendors nailed down. So in my mind, these are the people that you have to have and that are the most important to you. So always that, of course, includes your venue, food and beverage, photo, video teams, band, if you want a live band. And sometimes that can include like florist, hair and makeup artist, rentals. If you're doing a tent, it definitely includes rentals. So those sorts of things are, after you get past those first like 4, they're kind of dependent on your priorities that you have. And so you kind of need to rank those of what you want and what you need and start going after your vendors in that order.
Perfect. So now we've covered timing, vendors, unique characteristics of Jackson. What are some other things that come to mind as you're helping a couple plan through their wedding in Jackson?
One of the things that I love about Jackson is the number of private properties that are available for rent for weddings and events. What I love about that is that you can have a good number of your guests stay on property and truly make it like an overall experience for them, because you're all together. You can do more events together, do more activities together than if you're like bussing people in from hotels or stuff like that. Or, if you have a larger party, taking over a hotel and just kind of doing a full, buyout there as well could be a possibility. But I think that really, to me, if you're going to do destination, make it a weekend, make it an experience for guests overall. And that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily sponsor everything that guests are doing. You can kind of create some options or, welcome cards with awesome ideas, or just letting them know where you're going to be and invite people along to join in on that if they're interested. But again, making sure that you kind of give some of that information early if they're going to need to book it on your wedding website or things like that, so that guests have the opportunity to partake in those with you.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I love that. I'm talking with a bride tomorrow. They're getting married in Jackson, and I love it because I checked out their website and they're making it that experience. So they're pretty much saying, hey, we're going to be doing these things, horseback riding. We're going to float the Snake River, invite only at the museum for the reception dinner. And it's just like, I see that and I'm just like, gosh, what an experience for people to come in and have. Because not only are they doing that, but then they're kind of throwing a multi-day weekend adventure at them. That it's not just the wedding. It's, hey, we spent this time with them together on the river or a horseback ride. And so exactly. Yes. If quality time and connecting with your guests, like if your community is really important to you, creating a full wedding weekend is going to be, and reducing your guest count is going to be one of the things that is going to be key for you to get what you want out of your wedding weekend. Because if you're inviting 300 people to a ceremony and reception, I can guarantee there's about 200 of those you're not going to actually end up talking to, or you're going to talk to for about 20 seconds. I mean, and there's no, there's a lot of weddings, large weddings, where people leave saying, I didn't even get to talk to the couple. But, if you're stretching that out over a couple of days and you're inviting people to different stuff like that, you're right. They get the opportunity to actually have an experience and a memory created with the couple that they wouldn't otherwise. Yeah. It's such a great opportunity, and it feels like such low hanging fruit to just incorporate. You spoke about venues, and then you spoke about there's a lot of private property options. From your knowledge, if you had to get married there and any venue or private property was an option, what would you choose and why? What stands out to you?
So I did a wedding at Antelope Trails Ranch in 2020, and it was so fun. It's a full private property buyout. It's been actually, so the and I may get the history a little bit off, but it basically became a wedding venue because the two oldest daughters decided they wanted to get married on property, and they've since hosted events there. And they have, so like we hosted, there's a gatehouse, and then there's a main house, and then there's like a woods house. The woods house is mostly just people stay at. There's not really an event space there, and then they're right up against the Snake River. So you can actually walk to the river from their property, and they've got a creek running through their property if you just want to do some small fishing there. But what I love is that there's a lot of places for events to happen. So you aren't just having the same spaces reused over and over throughout the weekend and things like that, or having to travel massively far distances to go to different locations because it's all just on property. So guests were bussed up to the gatehouse for the welcome dinner and kind of like fun times. So we had some cornhole set up. We had fire pits set up. We had a tented dinner, and then everybody moved inside that gatehouse. There was like, or I guess I should say, like all the really young guests moved into the gatehouse for like, they had a big bar area, and everybody just drank and had a good time, turned up the music, hung out. It was just like a lovely time. And they kept it going until long after I had gone to bed to prepare for the next day. But then the next morning, and so really guests, unless they were staying on property, that's all they saw of the property to start with on the first day. Yeah. And then the second day they moved up to the main house where the reception tent was set up. We walked them around the main house, and a little short 10-ish minute drive. They do have gators for guests that need transportation over to the ceremony site overlooking the river. And then guests walk back up. There was passed wine along the pathway for guests to get on their walk, and came over for their cocktail hour and reception at the tent. And that was just such a fun, I felt like an overall kind of like they got to explore a little bit with the wedding, but it wasn't intense. The little walk was a nice little trail and stuff like that. And also too, I love when as a planner, I get a lot of support from a venue and their property manager genuinely, like, I wanted to pack him up in my suitcase and take him home. I loved working with him. And I was like, can I take you everywhere with me? Because he's just so knowledgeable about the property, and also like gave really good tips and advice for things, and, you know, vendor recommendations when we needed some like very niche things that I hadn't had to get in Jackson before. And it was lovely.
That was awesome. That sounds really exciting. Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to mind, or should they just give you a phone call and chat with you and learn all more about the stuff?
Well, yeah, no, I would say, you know, when you're thinking about it, for other things, I love that Jackson has that small town feel, but still really high level of service. And so just when you're thinking about the type of wedding that you want, you know, the Jackson wedding to me is laid back luxury. It's going to be, you know, some people confuse that destination weddings are somehow cheaper. They are not. They can be more cost effective because you're typically having less guests there, but you're probably still spending about the same amount because you are having to cover more things than you would, including your own travel and accommodations, than you would for a traditional hometown wedding. But to me, if you want that sense of adventure, you want a laid back elegance and luxury for your guests, if you want quality service with a small town feel, you know, there still is an airport there, which, by the way, is going to be closed April to June this year. So keep that in mind when you're planning. They're actually doing a major renovation, but throughout planning for things, kind of keep a lookout on the local happenings and the local doings, because if you aren't somebody who lives there, you may not be familiar with a certain festival that's coming through town, or, you know, different things like airport closures or different things like that. Like, definitely like talk to a planner, look into some of the things going on with that. For example, Mardi Gras going on right now in New Orleans. I would not want to be a planner planning a wedding the next couple weekends in New Orleans, because imagine the guest transportation alone is a logistical nightmare. So definitely something to consider there. But still, you know, these are the sorts of things. They do have the airport close by. It is fairly drivable and things like that. So if that's what you're looking for, I definitely think that Jackson should be high on your short list.
Perfect. No, that was super helpful. Well, hopefully you were helped by this. If you want to learn more and you're like, man, I really want to talk with Skyler about planning my wedding, they can find you on Instagram, which if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you are, most likely you'll find links below this film. And then Skyler, if they wanted to fill out a contact form, they would go to
my website. It's www.skylercaitlin.com. That's SKYLARCAITLIN.com.
Perfect. And I'll link that below too. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you helped by that. Thank you so much, Skyler. And enjoy the rest of your day at the event at the hotel.
Thank you.